Amazing. Cool. So, the second episode of season 2 of Months in Motion. Very, very excited for this one. Today, we are joined by Jon Howell. Jon Howell is the principal product designer at Ramp, where he leads the brand experience team working on the intersection of brand and product to craft emotive, highly considered experiences across visual design, motion, and interaction. Over the last decade, Jon has shaped brand and product experiences for companies like Dropbox, Microsoft, Twitch, Lyft, Robinhood, and SurveyMonkey, helping some of the world's most recognizable brands build trust, preference, and real emotional connection with their users. He describes his practice as brand experience design, designing every touch point from in-product flows to marketing moments through brand conscious lens so that brand and product feel like one coherent story. Outside of Ramp, he runs freelance studio and creates the brandexperience.com, where he studies standout branded product experiences and the systems behind them, especially through the lens of motion. Jon, great to have you on. Thanks for taking the time to jump in and join us on this one. I'm really excited. I wanted Jack here for this one because I think we're probably going to get a bit nerdy around some of the tech, some of the tools. He's in a better position to do that than I am. But yeah, thanks so much for jumping on with us.
Yeah, of course.
It's amazing. Cool. Wicked. Well, I would love to. I know we spoke about this when we kind of chatted before setting this up. I would love to just talk a little bit more about like what exactly is brand experience design. I know when we spoke before, you mentioned it's still kind of like a relatively new-ish / unknown practice that kind of sits in between branding design. It's got some kind of coding, dev sides to it. I'd just know in like your words, how do you best describe the role and like why do you think it's so important nowadays?
Yeah. So by definition, I like to, define brain experiences they're kind of the emotions and cognitions and behavioral responses evoked by brain related stimuli. And brain related stimuli could be in a physical or a digital space, but essentially it's like the things that you react to that shape how you think and feel and talk about brands and products.
So yeah, I would love to jump into a little bit around like new systems and tech. I think that's definitely something that's obviously going to be really, really kind of bringing this to the forefront of brands nowadays. We've got tools like Cavalry and Rive, which we discussed, new workflows, new possibilities, AI, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point as well. But I'd love to hear a little bit about like in terms of these like new tools, particularly I imagine Rive probably being one of the more kind of prominent ones. But how has this been enhancing the work that you do and kind of shifting the landscape of brand experience design?
Yeah. So there's obviously a plethora of tools just because there's different experiences that you can build logged out, logged in, motion, like I think first stepping back for a second, the levers that you can pull in building branded product experiences can range from, color, typography, illustration, micro interactions, motion design, haptic feedback, sonic feedback. There's so many different things that you can pull. And so I think the tools will range depending on what you're using or what you're trying to build. And so, a lot of the times in the past, we've used Lottie, After Effects, Jitter Video. We dabbled a little bit in Rive. I think the state machine has been something that like motion designers that I've partnered with have kind of had to get up to speed with. But it does create like a very, if you have specific outcomes you want, Rive is great for that versus, a very linear experience with Lottie. I think Lottie actually just came out with their state machine a few months ago, though.
Yeah.
So it's they're kind of competing for space there. But also like I love building in ProtoPie as well. I think it's a great, especially on mobile. It's just there's not very many prototyping tools out there that you can plug into like haptic feedback. And so being able to like tinker with the different types of feedback that you get on the device, and then also like bringing in sound as well and pairing those two together. Yeah, I think ProtoPie is really great for that. So it's kind of like a mix too, because sometimes I'll build animation in Jitter, and then I'll bring it into ProtoPie or I'll prototype in Figma. It's really what works best for the experience that you're building. It's not like cut and dry. Like these are the tools I use for doing this. Sometimes I'll have to hop into After Effects to like get something really dialed that I can't quite do in Jitter. Yeah, so it just varies really. And I think like making sure that it fits what you're building for, and that's kind of the process that we use. It's not really there's no wrong answer, I would say.
Yeah. What was that? Was it called ProtoPie? I've not heard of that one.
ProtoPie, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And how does that kind of differ to like Rive and kind of Lottie thoughts on what does that do?
Yeah. So like for instance, Rive and Lottie are mostly focused on motion.
Yeah.
And ProtoPie is mainly like prototyping specifically. And so you're not building animations inside ProtoPie. you're building like full prototypes. So if you wanted to go through an onboarding flow and you wanted to have like specific interactions where you could like type in the text input field and you type something in and then a result would come into like the results field, you could do that. You're not faking it. It's actually using data.
Okay.
That you're setting. Yeah. You can also do like, we had some work that I did at Robinhood that was, it was like a stock gifting program. We had this like crazy little like glass, like, container, and it had like a stone in it. And if you held we had a button at the bottom. If you held the button, the glass container would like start to like crush the thing, and it would get a stronger vibration as the thing started to collapse.
Oh, okay.
And you can control how hard the vibration on the phone would collapse as it goes. So you like low, medium, high. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then once it got to the end, it would have like an explosion, and then there would be an animation. So I would tie the beats of the phone when it got all the way to the bottom, and then have an explosion animation, and then it would like give away, like you'd be essentially like opening like a loot box. Kind of like you do on like Overwatch or something like that.
That's super cool.
So, yeah.
I love it that you timed the vibrations as well, so it like really like matched up with what was going on with the visuals as well. That's cool.
Yeah, that's something that I didn't even think. We got like sound and like the animation and stuff. But I always find this like Apple are really good with this, right? Like they've got great haptic engines in their devices, but also just the way that everything that you interact with on the phone, like that kind of feedback, just something I didn't even really think about before, like talking about it now. And it's like it really does elevate the experience, right? And the connection feeling, I guess.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because like the things that they do, it's kind of like engraved in your brain. Like whether you take your Apple Watch or you double click your phone and you go to pay, like that the ting sound when you pay for your coffee, it's like they own that. You could be sleeping and hear that. I've seen videos online that like people are like trolling people and they have like that sound queued up on their phone.
Yeah, I've seen these.
Somebody like, thank you for the money, and they run away. It's like it's so entrenched in people's brains that like that sound and that feedback on the phone that's paying for something.
Yeah.
Speaking about kind of elevating brand experiences through this kind of design, be it sound design, haptic design, interactive design, how do you kind of approach when working with brands? Like, how do you bring the brand into all of these elements? Like, what are the kind of things that you think about that kind of match up to the company's tone of voice or personality or whatever it be?
Yeah. So I think that goes back to the tools that we were talking about. There's so many different levers you can pull, but I think the main thing that I like to focus on is, where is the brand today? Are they looking like brands are continually evolving? And so let's say, just to give you an example, let's say a company has a specific illustration style, but they're interested in testing 3D illustration style. So maybe they're working with a studio or an illustrator. And so when working on the brand experience team, we're really tightly connected to the product. And so maybe we'll partner with the growth team to talk about a new feature that they're launching, or let's say it's a new feature that they're launching and we want people to sign up for a specific thing. Well, maybe we'll use this as a testing ground for the new illustration style that brand is testing. They're not quite sure, right? So we'll use a scenario like that where we A/B test, like maybe a 2D illustration style and a 3D illustration style, or maybe we're looking at bringing more emotive motion into the product experience, right? And so maybe we'll test new motion curves in the product experience. And so maybe it has nothing to do with illustration. Sometimes it's also like voice and tone, right? When's the right place I always use this rideshare example because I think it's a good one, is like, let's say when I was at Lyft, we could track like when a rider was far off their route, right? Or they were heavily delayed. And so let's say in that moment where someone's heading to a date or an important job interview or whatever it might be, and you're 18 minutes off your arrival time. Well, why don't we send them an SMS and say, hey, we realize you're 18 minutes later than your arrival. Here's 50% off your ride, or we'll cover your next ride, or whatever it might be. And that has nothing to do with any visuals or color palette or typography or anything like that. It's strictly an SMS. And so it's showing empathy in that moment where someone might be actually frustrated and there's a change in emotion, whether it's good, bad, unsure, you know what I mean? And so when you meet them in that moment, you're starting to build that relationship with them. And I think that's the crux of everything in brand experience design. It's like, how do you build a relationship with your customers so they become, the trusted friend? You're going to convert more loyal, and I would say, not confident, but like people that trust you. You know what I mean? You're kind of breaching that gap between like, hey, I'm unsure, this is the first time I've used this product, or maybe I'm a power user of this product, and this is something that I want to like trust over time. And so these experiences, the culmination of these experiences, do that. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Lyft example you shared there, obviously, like sending that SMS like before they've got out the car, for example, makes a big difference as well. Like sending it at that point versus like,
Right.
once they've got out, like a day later, because at that point you've probably calmed down and you kind of gone through the stages of being frustrated. Sending it at the right time as well is obviously really important in that
Yep.
instance as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that something
And,
you
like,
guys like tested as well? Like when to send it as well? Like, 'cause obviously, like,
yeah,
the
well,
timing.
yeah. So that was one thing that we kind of came up with while at Lyft was storyboarding the experience to know when and where to do that. Like another example is, a guy, let's say some guy is sitting at home and he gets a text message from his friends that, hey, let's go out to dinner tonight, like at 7 p.m. And he's like, okay, great, sounds good. And now let's say it's 4 o'clock and he is wanting to drive for Lyft, but he wants to like make a couple bucks. So, because he can afford more appetizers or whatever it might be, dessert. And so in that moment, is there a way that we are smart enough to know to send him a push notification after he logs on the Lyft for the first time? Is like, hey, I want to head in this direction. I'm heading to LA for dinner. Like, I want to drive in this direction and we can get you there while going to dinner, right? And maybe that's the right moment to like send that push notification in app or something like that. Heading somewhere in the right place. And we might not know that, but being aware of that feature, and then in the future, like initially when they first log on, maybe next time he's going out to lunch, it's like, okay, well, I can start driving towards my location and make money, Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, that's super cool. Kind of, just about leave a little bit earlier and then make some money on the way, and then kind of two birds with one stone.
Yep. And you're not late. And I think like the thing I didn't finish that thought, but what we would do is like we'd have like containers, like comic book style, right? You could draw stick figures in there. Like it just helps you understand the weird nuances of as someone goes through an experience from like sitting at home, looking at their phone to getting in the car to like checking their phone for the first time. You get to understand where these like different like changes in emotion are. Like, and some things you wouldn't think about when you're just designing digital experiences. When you're in Figma or Cloud Code or however you're building, it's like those weird things, you have to think about how you would be in that moment, not how do you build a UI that gets somebody to be able to, sign on and start driving for Lyft,
And when you're doing those like storyboards, do you just like to like hand draw those? Like, what's your approach with that?
Yeah, like honestly, like stick figure,
Yeah, just
because then you stop for a second from the very beginning to like walking in the door to dinner. It's like, let's say he finished his ride or he finished his drive, like all the way, he parks his car. Can we reassure him the value that he made for that, let's say he drove for an hour before that and you have like cha-ching and you just made $120 on your right. So great. Now I know I've got a little bit of wiggle room when I get paid out. Maybe I won't get paid out immediately, but tomorrow when I get paid out, I have X amount of money to pay for that,
Yeah.
So
That's really cool. How do you like test the sentiment on this? Do you do a lot of like kind of research group stuff before, or is it mostly just about like shipping it, A/B testing in the moment?
Yeah, it depends on where we're building, but there isn't a lot of like testing beforehand. Like I think, a lot of the experiences that we build are small, low touch experiences. The one we talked about earlier, like the stock gifting one, it was rather focused, but we didn't do testing on that. It was more or less like, sometimes it's like a toast that has an animated like illustration or icon in the toast, and like it's just drawing attention to that piece of UI. And so like we did something at Dropbox where we were trying to get people to their storage was like full. And so we used this toast notification with like a small rocket ship that was like superpower or supercharge your, workflow. And we wanted people just to be aware, but we didn't want to make this like, red, like alert, like, hey, your storage is full. We wanted to, hey, supercharge your workflow and like add more storage and you get all these other benefits, right? And so we just wanted to attract attention to it. And so testing a little animated Lottie, like of a rocket ship didn't really make sense. And so a lot of experiences kind of like those where it's like, it just feels better. And it's the culmination of those over time that you're like, wow, like it's like something you don't even know. It's kind of like a subconscious thing, And I think when you think about the best products and brands out there today, those are the things that like, when you stop and think, like when you pair your Apple Watch for the first time, and the particles are flying around and you scan it and then you just go about your day. No one recalls that. But when they associate or they think about Apple products, it's like it's so easy to get started. Whether it's an iPhone, it's Apple Watch, and those are the things that make it feel magical. So that's what I think a lot of people should be focusing on in their products, where it's like, I don't even have to think about this. It's so easy. And then when someone asks you about it, that's what you say.
That sense of magic, that feeling of trust, how important and like what role does like motion play in all of that? Because a lot of those examples you talked about were featuring some sort of movement, Lottie files, the Apple Watch particles. How does that add to that experience and help build that trust?
Yeah. Motion is definitely a large portion of the work that we do. Whether it's through UX motion and leveraging motion tokens that are built into our design system. Some of them are more bespoke, like onboarding moments. Like I think it's important to just even call out for a second, like the stuff that like brand experience teams work on. So like onboarding flows, like empty states, new feature launches, what's new in your products, like talking about, even new features, new products. I think there's moments where like you're customizing or personalization on your profile. Like how do you make it bespoke? Is there like some sort of themed color? Like all of those things are different variations of things that brand experience teams do. Your question was talking about how much does trust come into play? Is that
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of the times, depending on the moment, so let's say you're going through an onboarding flow, right? You're kind of unsure. This is the first time you logged on the product for the first time. And most people just skip and go through and get to the end, and they don't listen to any of that stuff. And so maybe that specific thing isn't the right solution here. How do you, and then your kind of, your whole thought process, how do we gain the trust of our user and make them feel confident that they know what to do on our product? And so maybe not even designing that sort of onboarding flow that everybody skips through. It's like, let them log in. And then is there another experience that allows them to gain trust that they know what they're doing in the experience? Like, I hate the word wizard, but like some sort of walkthrough where you're pointing out things when they first get started, like, hey, this is how you add a new group to XYZ product. This is how you interact with your customers. This is how you contact them. This is the inbox. And it's less of like the standard walking through. It's like you're really thinking about in your storyboarding, how do we gain trust of their users? How do we make them more confident when they use our product? And how do we make them fall in love with our products? And those aren't linear things. Those are sprinkled throughout. They're not just through onboarding. It could be for power users, new users, and that can come in different shapes and forms. But yeah, I could go on and on about that.
Yeah, well, I find that topic really interesting at the minute, particularly in the experience space. Like we spoke about it with Dunbar last week, around looking at like the design languages and systems that like Google Gemini are building, or like Claude, and the way that interaction element, or when you're waiting for something, how is the movement flowing? How like Google use color, but kind of also balance like still looking professional whilst being like friendly and approachable. Because I think there is like, particularly, not so much just with tech in general, but definitely AI. There's a big lack of like trust, like from the general like public. So I find it really interesting to see how like human emotion can be brought in through movement or guided experience, like you were saying about this is how you do X, Y, Z, and then like building that trust with platform. And I think, again, even more so today, I think it's really interesting to see that the companies kind of looking into all that stuff.
Yeah, that specific topic about how agents respond, think, fail, memory saved. There's a lot of things, the past few years now, I've been thinking about like how you build an identity system around AI that's essentially the elevated version of the product that you're building. We did a little bit of this on Dropbox Dash, and been working on some stuff that's like thinking about, it's not its own brand. It's like everything today, like the visual metaphor is like a sparkle or like a gradient. And it's funny because like any product you use, it's like kind of synonymous with like the sparkle or gradient. And that's an AI related feature. Maybe that's a good thing. It's like, if you think about the save icon in like docs, it's a floppy disk. Like most kids today wouldn't understand what a floppy disk is, but they maintain that because that's the visual metaphor that people have attached themselves to, And so like building emotion into those experiences, whether you use a sparkle or a gradient, I think motion comes to life and really helps do that. How does it transition to another state? If it's thinking and then it saves memory and then it goes on to the next step, how do you seamlessly do that? That's not through voice and tone. Maybe it's through color, but it's all through color, motion, maybe even sound. And those are the levers you're pulling, and then maybe the next thing that you do is like voice and tone, where it says you're in Claude code, it says like tinkering, or it says like thinking, or coming back with a different response. Like you're kind of grabbing all the little puzzle pieces to build that experience, and then you go to the next thing, so
yeah. Characters as well, like you were saying, testing the 2D 3D character stuff. The browser that I was mentioning to you just before we started recording this, Strawberry, like you've got this like little agentic person that just follows you around and follows your mouse around, and I've seen a few, like How did a really great rebrand for an AI company recently that again was very character focused, and seeing that kind of switch, I think characters is another way to really building trust, and seeing a lot of like AI companies doing that now.
Cool. Like Notion AI.
Yeah, no, so I was gonna say like that interaction with like the face and everything through there as well. And it also is like it's very organic as well. Like that animation, all that movement feel, it flows seamlessly from one to the other. And I think they actually use Rive for that as well.
Yeah, it was Buck, wasn't it? Of course it was Buck.
But that's super cool. Claude as well is actually, they've got some nice little like micro interaction stuff as well.
Yeah. It's funny too, because like, glad you brought that out, because there's kind of like two different camps, right? It's like the sparkle gradient camp, then there's like the character camp. They're like like Clippy, like Rive or Notion AI. Yeah, for real. I heard that they're bringing that back on.
I've heard.
But I think like Notion killed it in that department. I think there's a lot of people that reference their like small character that you can personalize them with cowboy hats on and all these things. Like they got lucky a little bit too, because their illustration style lent them to that specific style. Before they had a great illustration style, and it's like, oh, this is perfect. They can like characterize their AI. It can have emotion. It can do all the things that they were doing before. So just I think that the irony of their illustration style lending itself to Notion AI is like so perfect. They were able to have a lot of fun with that. So really, really, really great execution.
Yeah, that their characters are really fun as well. You kind of just see like we even use them in our Slack channel, just like those profile pictures. Like they're just the really great illustrations, and they work really well, and you can customize them. It kind of reminds me of the Nintendo Wii stuff as well, where you can do the characters on there as well, like kind of just being able to like customize and interact with it as well.
I think that also adds that, just like again, it's that personal level, right? Like you were talking about, for example, when kind of like looking at platform areas, or like how do you tailor it to somebody specifically, right? And that's just like direct. You're literally creating your own little avatar of yourself that then sits within the app, and all of a sudden you've got this kind of almost connection with what you've got within there, right?
Yep. It's like no one, unless you talk about this in this setting, which nobody does, unless you're in a bunch of designers, but like your average person isn't gonna realize that like, oh, they made their custom theme for their Robinhood account purple or pink, so the rest of their UI is that color, where their avatar has like on their Xbox is XYZ. It's because like that's the thing you associate with you on that platform. You've got, when you log into your Netflix account, you picked your little avatar that sits at the top. Well, there's a goofy little claymation person, but like that's you. And a bunch of those things that happen over time, you're just strengthening that relationship. It's just, I think that's so interesting, because like when I was younger and I got into design, in high school, I was a sophomore in high school, and I was designing band posters, like crusty band posters for my buddy's band, like computer graphics class around like Photoshop 7.0 or 6.0 or whatever it was. And I thought it was so interesting that like we're just building these wacky band posters that to get people to show up to a venue they've never been to listen to music they've never listened to, and to pay money to get in. And you just like print this thing out, put it on the cafeteria door, and people show up. Like, that's insane. And so if you take that same logic and design digital products in a way that like you could influence how they think or get them to do something, like the psychological thing behind that is so, it's nuts. And I think it's like a kind of like half like brand marketing and great product design. And I think the best products are the ones they're like, wow, I didn't even actually realize that.
Speaking of that, actually, I was quite interested around kind of balancing form and function, particularly with this style of like experience design, where you kind of like, I think you want to like show off and you want to make things look snazzy and look really kind of modern and sleek and moving, but then there is obviously also just dialing that back so you're not deterring from the experience itself or kind of like distracting in any ways that you wouldn't want to. How do you kind of approach doing that, like when it comes to balancing like something that's visually interesting whilst maintaining the actual functionality of it?
Yeah. You know, one of the principles I've kind of taken it places I've been in the past, and where I'm at today at Ramp is like, how do you can make something, you know, have motion or feel delightful, but the main thing you have to remember is you can't get in the way of the job to be done to the user. And so whether that's, you know, I like using the Twitter like button, for example, or the X like button. If you remember during the holidays, they had like little like pumpkins and a turkey and like different animations for their like buttons, but it was the same timing as their normal like button. And so like you can infuse brand moments into those specific dates, or like Valentine's Day had like an explosion. There's a motion designer named Javier Saldana. I want to give him credit because he worked on that. And those specific moments, you're not changing that experience. Like, and you're not getting in the way. You're not slowing somebody down. And I think that's the tenet you have to take, where it's like, yes, you can make something still feel really delightful, but if you're slowing somebody down for the sake of motion design or, you know, delight, you're missing the plot, because that's not the point. You know, you want to sprinkle those in with they're already like, or like make them even more efficient. How do you make them even more efficient and give them like just, you know, a carrot? Like my first week at Ramp, you know, I was at a company offsite and I used my Ramp card for the first time, and I don't know what I was buying. I think I was buying a slice of pizza because we were in New York. I got a text message through SMS that was like telling me exactly how much I had left in my per diem for the week with emojis next to each one. In that moment, it was like, it met me there. And I was like, you have X amount left in your per diem. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Didn't get in the way of me using my credit card. It didn't slow me down. I didn't have to log into an app. Nothing. I thought that was so magical. So that's kind of the tenets.
Monzo are really good with that.
Yeah,
Monzo.
I'm gonna say like they definitely like changed the game, didn't they? Like, but like from like old school banking to kind of like making it modern, fun, and like having, you know, integration and being able to do like way more as well than like what you could do before as well. And like a lot of it as well just like makes so much sense. Like, why was this never ever done before?
I remember when they started doing the year in review, like the Spotify like wrapped sort of thing, and I thought that was just like for a banking app, like so, and just some of the funny stuff that came up. I remember we all were joking about it, like back in Bristol when I was living there. We had one friend who was constantly borrowing money off of all of us, like every month. Like right at the end of the month, he was always asking for like money to grab some food. And then at the end of the year, we all had like this thing, and it was like the person that's borrowed the most money off you is, and we all had the same person in our group chat. We were all just sharing it, like surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was great.
like Wrapped is a great example as well. Like loads of brands has kind of like lent onto that as well recently, and are kind of doing that kind of like wrap up again. I think it's more like it's like kind of bridging that gap between like you and them, right? It's like, you know, how, you know, your stats and then the app, and it's like, you know, all this thing around like customization and everything else. It's just it kind of really closing that gap and having that kind of seamless flow between, you know, you and whatever app, platform, site.
Yeah. And that's a really great example, because I think it's because a lot of people and a lot of teams or companies don't understand how to track these things, right? It's like you get a product manager and it's like, well, what metric is it going to increase? Well, just because you put animated rocket chip up in your toast, your NPS score isn't going to go up and to the right? Like, but the thing I talked about earlier made a bunch of money, like that little push, that little toast. But you're not going to put that in the product and say, hey, we're going to A/B test and we're going to see this huge metric change. Spotify Wraps, right? Social sharing. There's your metric. How many people share that on Instagram? That's just a different metric than a normal metric you look at while building normal product features in like a pod, right? And so you kind of have to not only when you're designing those experiences, you're kind of thinking with like a different like wavelength, but also like how you measure those things, and then how you justify why that work is important or why you should be building those sorts of things. Because a lot of times those things can just be swept under the rug. Like, why would someone build an animation for holidays on X? No, it's those things, those social sharing. And I think like the same thing happens when you go to Starbucks. People, I don't know, some people maybe connect it now, but you know, when you go to Starbucks and your name, like my wife was at Starbucks the other day. What's your name? Jenny. And then when she got her cup, it said Henny. And it's like, they purposely write your name wrong. That's my theory, So you take a picture of it and put it on social. It's like, that's my theory, at least. It's like, why on earth would they do that? They want people to take pictures of the cups next to the logo and put it on social media, and then more people see that thing. Why else would they do that?
How do you sell in ideas like this that might not necessarily have like a metric that you could say in like 3 months of having it released be like it's worked? Like how do you approach like suggesting little features and experiences like that when there's not necessarily something you're going to immediately be able to like back it up with, or it's going to be a more broad, holistic kind of long-term stat, I guess?
Yeah. So I kind of cheat a little bit. And so I essentially, within the company, I figure out who the product managers are that are excited about this type of work. I look at what designers are excited to collaborate. And then does that team or that pod have a really great front-end engineers that are willing to work, whether they're using Rive or Lottie or whatever it might be. And so I figure out the small wins with that team and start to build that kind of portfolio of projects where you open the trench coat and you have all these projects here, and then you go to the next team where maybe there's something you're not sure that it'll work or you're not super confident. And then you sell that into that team and show them, you open the trench coat and say, hey, look, here's all the projects we've done with this team. And then it's like, now you're starting to gain influence across the company. People believe in these things, and now you're just strengthening your portfolio within the company. And so as the snowball starts to roll down the hill, you'll notice that you're getting too many requests to field all of them, and then you're going to have to prioritize all those things based upon highest visibility, highest impact things at the company, and only work on those things, and then figure out a solution how you solve for the other things. But to answer your question, like if you start there, then getting buy-in later on is easy, because it's really hard in the beginning to say like, hey, this onboarding flow that has all this crazy motion and 3D illustration, like you're going to have skeptics in the beginning, get those little tiny wins and then figure out how you leapfrog into the next bigger thing and the bigger thing, because then you're going to have your portfolio to sell it in.
How did you come across that kind of approach? Is that something you've kind of just like worked on over the years, or have you kind of like always liked to, always tried to do that?
That is something I learned over the years.
Yeah.
I kind of got into brand experience design in this gap when I was at Lyft, because I was on the product team, but I worked really closely with brand. I worked on like the little pink light on the dash of all the Lyft vehicles. I don't know if you guys have seen that before. And so that was an interesting thing, because it was a piece of hardware that like sat on the dash, and it wasn't the product, right? It wasn't in like your device. And so kind of bridging the gap between those things was my kind of area of focus. Yeah, I learned that at Lyft just because we had so many kind of wacky ideas we wanted to do with the amp. And as we started to build these things, it was a little bit tougher to get buy-in on things that, as we started to reach out to other teams to build features, there was a lot of skepticism around like, we'd build this very robust prototype or this idea, and it'd be like, hey, we don't have the time to work on this. Like this is more at the end of our process to add in that delight. And I think as time went on, I realized that like the things at the end, people said they would get to, they would just go on to the next thing that their team would have to build. They would never come back. And that's a very common story at most companies I've worked at. It's like, yeah, we'll get to that if we have time, if engineering has time. But like a lot of times that doesn't work. And so like you have to build that into your process in the beginning and planning to say like, hey, we're going to dedicate time to building these things. Because if you try to like shoehorn them in, it just doesn't work. And so now I've been trying to figure out a process to like influence from the very beginning and say, hey, this is why this is important. Here's our portfolio of projects. And like, okay, we need to dedicate time so this thing feels really magical. Or, we get people to that experience, like whether it's signing up for a new product or whatever it might be, we get them to that point where they're already bought in on that,
Yeah.
Very cool. So I'm interested. There's obviously like a big overlap in what you do in terms of skill sets. Like you've got to have an understanding of design itself. You've got to have an understanding of product, a bit of understanding about coding, a bit of understanding about motion. Curious to hear like maybe a little bit more about your journey, how you got into it, but also just like any advice you might give to budding designers that are interested in this world, but might be a little bit confused about like what skill set should I learn? What's the kind of best route into this kind of work? Would love to hear a little bit more about your journey and just any advice people that might want to get involved in this kind of stuff.
Yeah. This is a really good question, because I think when I've met with designers in the past, I think they're really interested in might be in brand and they don't know how to break into product, or they might be in product, they want to break into brand. And I think, it's the thing that interests you most. If you're working in brand, and you're excited about, this kind of intersection, you want to get more influence into the product, like the craftsmanship and understanding like how products are built is like really important. Maybe it's finding a mentor in product design team, or someone that you look up to, or finding somebody that can give you advice on how to break into that is really important. Working on those things, I think today it's so much easier than it was a while ago to figure out how do you do your own side project to build a new product, right? You see a lot of students that come out of a school and they're rebranding like huge companies. Like there's so many things you don't understand, like are in the background of the thing that you're doing. And so I think product's a little bit easier, where you can focus very much on like, what's the checkout flow for XYZ product, or like what is like the launch screen look like in the Starbucks app when you go into looking at all your rewards. You can focus on that one specific thing and use your mentor as a guide to figure out, okay, how do I break into building for products, and the vice versa too. Like if you're a product designer and you're kind of getting bored of like this, like putting the Lego pieces together, and you kind of do small side projects for your friends, for they're starting up a beer company, or they're starting up whatever it might be, a coffee shop, and you're doing like little logos and tinkering on the side. There's that spark of interest where it's like, I'm not just like putting UI components together to build a feature. It's like, I'm kind of interested in that brand component. Like to me, it's understanding both sides well, or just like diving deeper into those things. And diving deeper might be like, following what, some of the top brand design studios are doing. Like what's successful, what's not, how are they integrating the things that you're doing currently into their case studies or whatever it might be. Like how do they use motion? Let's say there's a product designer that's like interested in motion, and they look at a case study from one of the large design studios, and they're, oh, I see how they're connecting. Like when you land on the homepage and the motion curves that they're using for transitions into the pages, and then you log into the product for the first time, that seamless experience into those things, like maybe that's of interest. So it's kind of like, it's more or less the interest that you have in that other discipline. If you're not passionate about it, it's probably not the place like you want to explore, because it's this weird gap. Because in a lot of companies, it's like, here's the product design team and here's the brand design team. There's very, very few companies have a wedge in between the middle of those two teams. And sometimes it does feel hard to break into, but there's so many people out there that are interested in those two kind of disciplines, but they just haven't dipped their toes in either category or area enough,
You mentioned about sort of tinkering with different tools and different areas as well. Is that something you still try and do now a lot? Like tinker around with like different areas, like, play around with different tools?
Jack, if I told you how many subscriptions I have, these tools that I've used like 3 or 4 times, and like literally the next week I like sign up for another one. I swear I have literally a reminder in my phone that's like parentheses, like $40 a month, $20 a month. And it's like the total is like almost $300 worth of different tools. And like the ones that have stuck around the most are like kind of I've brought into my workflow now at Ramp and also in past places where, I know when I have something that I need to prototype on mobile, like my go-to is ProtoPie.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to use haptic feedback or sound or anything like that. But yeah, tinkering with tools is like the name of the game. And like cool stuff like endlesstools.io, I think is a great one, where like you want to create some really quick 3D like animations. Like I can use that, record the screen, and then bring that into an experience. So if I get to the end of an onboarding flow or an empty state, or if I want to create an Easter egg in the products, like now I've got this really sick 3D rendered icon or logo mark or whatever it might be that I can interact with. And I didn't have to crack open Cinema 4D, right? I could do that on the fly. Or like, let's say I wanted to prototype something quickly, just like a motion idea. I'll open Jitter and I can crank that out in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like this is what thinking looks like on an AI product, right? Here's when it finishes thinking and it stores a memory. I just build it in Jitter in 10 minutes. And then now I've got a motion artifact of it. And then I can use that as a reference to go build it in Claude code,
Yeah. I
really
think that's really interesting. I think there are sometimes I think people get stuck in terms of trying to like figure out like the best tool or the right tool in terms of like the workflow. And I think often as well, it's just being like flexible and being open, just like try new things. And like, especially like if you have time, like when you're working on stuff, and the stuff that we do all the time is, like if we're trying to do something, okay, like let's use this tool, test it out, especially on like stuff you're experimenting with and working on. It's really quick and easy to, try it, maybe it works really well, maybe it doesn't, move on to the next and kind of just iterate and go through that. And I think like you said, you really quickly start to get an idea of like a foundational set of tools that work really well for your workflow as well. And again, like with AI now, these tools are changing all the time. So like new ones are coming out every week. And then so like being flexible and being able to like jump ship and try something else out is really helpful within like a fast-paced environment. It really helps.
Yeah. And I think too, like as you start to bop around on that in that area, even like especially with AI, is like you guys like have probably heard like skills. As you're building the skills like markdown file, you're referencing other things that are out in the wild that just become like spaghetti soup of things that you've seen in the past. So that could be like, I want to create motion curves informed by linear and Airbnb and right. And now you've got this soup of all these things that already exist. And now, hey, spit out like motion curves or like animations that are in reference to these things. Like, I think there's a balance between like being bespoke enough and not just like building a skill that's going to go look like everything else. You have to have some sort of craft and like perspective on your own of like what that could be. And so like, I like to use the example of, if you think of, when you say, hey, if you told an illustrator, like, hey, we no longer make paper or pencils or crayons. You just have to like tell the computer what you want to do. Could you imagine an illustrator or a painter or sculptor, like to go do that thing by just telling them that? Like, we are all creatives, but as a creative director, if you know what you want, but maybe there's other things, you need to like have a pencil sketch in a notebook or something like that. And so I think if you're just spitting things out, like by using AI, you're going to get the same results unless you continually iterate with your words. Like, that's why I like tools where like Whisper Flow, where you can just talk and then you just
that. I use that all the time.
It's the best.
Yeah, and I'm so dyslexic as well. So like it is like such a lifesaver for me. Like I'll just talk to it all the time, just spits it all out. Like I love that. Yeah, it's
the best. And it helps bridge that gap between like, I don't have to like type this thing all, but I think the painter example is really hard where it's like, okay, I know what I need to build for this thinking animation. And then when memory is saved, I have the vision in my head. So I'll do it in Jitter. But like if I sat there and talked through it, it would take so much longer to get to the solution. And sometimes you gotta, like you said, you have to figure out what works for you to get there faster. And for you, it might be something. For Jimmy, it might be something. But for me, it might be just like drawing a little sketch on a notebook pad,
and then it comes back to like, drawing some stuff and putting pen to paper and, and actually just like visualizing stuff. You sketch it out, you're like, okay. And then you kind of get that mind map of, okay, you scribble this out and then it goes over here and then it over here. And then that's kind of like where it spider webs out, right?
Exactly. And I think that's great advice for like going back to your question from before, Jimmy, is like, how do folks that are like budding designers break into this space? Like, keep that in the back of your mind. Don't just think you would just give it a skill or you like describe like, hey, reference XYZ studio and everything that they do in this company, right? Because they do it really well. No, have your own perspective and draw on the piece of paper or like do a storyboard, because that's how you get to something that feels bespoke and crafted and unique, not just some spaghetti soup.
Yeah, I think that's also the danger with people that see it as an easy fix. Like AI is just the blandification of stuff. Again, it's just repeating the same stuff, right? It's like, how do you incorporate your own vision and your own idea and guide it in a way that you get something unique, right? Kind of speaking tech and looking into the future, switching a bit from software and talking about hardware. With obviously, we discussed you got a pair of the Meta Ray-Bans that have come out. Obviously, there's a lot of leaks and rumors around Apple's kind of new wearables potentially releasing glasses and stuff. I'm really curious from your point of view, how do you think products like this are going to change the way that we interact with brands and how brands show up in the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think other areas within design that we kind of expect today, it's kind of like the SMS example from before, where SMS is very common, but something you don't expect to like, you get like, you use your credit card and you get SMS of like, here's your breakdown of all your expenses. That's a different vehicle. So when you put on those glasses for the first time, like the way when you put them on or you open them and they make a sound with the battery level, or it's ready to record, or like the Meta glasses, I'm going to admit this, but maybe there's some other Pokemon lovers out there, but like I use them to rip Pokemon packs. And so like, yeah. And so like, I'll like, hey Meta, record a video, or I'll just like hit like hold the button on the side. So then I can get like the perspective of opening the pack. but I've gotten so like familiar with the sound that it uses when it starts recording that like I know if it's actually recording, even if the display doesn't show up in the lens. So because sometimes it doesn't. I think it's a bug, but I know, okay, it's recording, and then when I hit it again, I know it has finished the video. And so I think as we start to use these products, you're gonna use those levers from sonic design and haptics inside the devices, whether it's on your face, whether it's on your wrist, whatever other pieces of hardware. Those things are going to be how you associate yourself with the brand, the way it talks to you. How does Meta respond? What is the voice? How do you personalize that voice to be specific to you? Like today, you can pick like Siri's voice. There's like a few options that you can do, but I think over time, what if you could customize that person? That's like it's not just 6 pre-canned voices. It's like your friend. It's the person. Maybe it's somebody you want to model it off of, right? Maybe they start to learn the way that you speak, the slang terms you use with your friends, the things that you say that, I'm stoked to go to the beach later. Like normal people might not use the vernacular, like I'm stoked or this is gnarly, you know what I'm saying? And so like maybe it starts to talk to you in that way. And that's another level of personalization. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I don't know.
That's cool. I'm also really interested around how it's like already beginning to change UI design as well, because I think there's been this big shift away from like solid block kind of flat design colors, right, to this like translucent design that we've seen in like the latest Apple OS. And again, like my kind of thinking or theory behind them kind of going down that route is because they are pushing more towards Vision OS, right, and they probably are looking at releasing like some glasses. So how is now like that change, because you can't just have a blank solid bit of color on a screen that you're seeing through, that translucency to help kind of bring the outside world and the digital world and kind of fuse them a bit more naturally. I find it really interesting as well just to watch this like general shift as well in UI design to a more translucent kind of look.
Yeah. To me, it feels like they're trying to not the thing we talked about earlier is not getting the way of the job to be done with the user. So if you're walking and you're looking through, like I know that the Meta glasses, they built their own maps, where like it's not using Google Maps, but it's that thing in the corner where, hey, I'm just walking down to the street to go to the closest coffee shop. Don't get in my way, but I want you to be my guide. And so like using that translucent thing, I think that the more they can get out of the way while also providing value, that's like the key to success. Obviously, I don't know what the definition of that is, but that's where I see those things, like you said, like translucent UI and those things that are kind of floating notifications. Like, don't distract me. I'm just trying to go to the coffee shop. Silence my notifications till I get there. Here's your download of the things that you missed.
Yeah, that's super cool. Wicked. Yeah, no, I think I'm definitely going to be, again, keep bringing it back to I am going to be interested to see how Apple approach. I've never actually tried the Vision OS Vision headset properly before, but be very interested to see how they start doing it, because they are obviously very, very good when it comes to like the experience design. Talking like hardware, software, AI, just looking ahead into the future, like what most excites you about how your role is changing and what's going to be kind of impacting it moving forward?
Yeah. Like I said, the bit of the learning curve for me was like starting their prototype more in Claude code. And I think obviously that's all the rave right now. I'm interested to see how we can start to make those experiences more bespoke more quickly through using, all of these like AI tools. Cause I think like I want to avoid as much as possible the spaghetti soup. And so like right now, my solution to that is like getting in, drawing on a piece of paper, sketching ideas, not just telling it something and the computer thinking, okay, let me look at all the other references I have in the back of my mind and spitting something out. Like, is it providing like a specific example? How over time is the products I've used today going to get smarter? Can I use the same ways that I animate something or move an icon or whatever it might be? Are there specific things I can use in reference in these AI tools? Does it know specific easing curves? And then like, I want to make this feel more, a smoother transition. How does it translate a smoother transition, right? Because like the way that you define something that like, hey, I need this to feel more fun. Your execution of fun could be something way different versus like the PM in the corner that's like, we need confetti. So how you know what I mean? So it's like, how do you define fun? And then how do these AI tools do that? Right now, they just use words and references. And so unless you feed it to them and give them an example of like an animation or whatever it might be, they don't have any idea of that. So hopefully in the future, and as these things start to progress, like I'd love to figure out a way that how do you get that secret sauce, and when you build something with your words, that you can get it to feel really bespoke and not like everything else. Like the blandification of an experience, like that's not the crux of brand experience design. It's those special moments that connect you with the brand or product.
Yeah, totally. Oh, that's awesome.
I think that's
Wicked. Well, this has been super interesting. I was really looking forward to this one. I thought it was going to be an interesting chat, something a little bit different, an area that we don't tend to talk about so much on the podcast. So I really appreciate you hopping on. Before we go, we always have to get a little photo because we'll put this on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
my little.
Nice one. Wicked. That's that was awesome. Thanks so much for your time, John. It's been really nice chatting with you. And appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for dealing with me. It's 9:01 a.m. So I was halfway through my coffee in the middle of that talk. So I was like trying to string words together and like,
Nice.
what's going on?
Very, very insightful. Super insightful. Yeah, thanks so much for your time again. I'm really excited to see all the stuff that you do in the new role. I'll be keeping my eyes peeled for sure.
Fingers crossed. All right. Thanks, Jack. Thanks.
Have a good day.
Nice
Catch you
meeting you.
later.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.